It's Wednesday, let's chat. Hi, I'm Kanan Chandran, the publisher of stormasia.com, and welcome to today's WED WEB CHAT, a regular series of discussions that covers current and topical issues, which we find will be of interest for a wide and larger audience. This is part of our Jobs 20XX work in progress series of discussions geared towards people looking for jobs in various areas. This is in conjunction with our partner OUE Limited, a diversified real estate owner, developer, and operator with a real estate portfolio located in prime locations in Asia. In the past, I remember when I got into a job, I just got into it. I didn't know what I wanted. There was no guidance, no counseling, no nothing. You just rolled out, rocked up somewhere, knocked on a door. If you got in, great. You got a foot in. And then you just kind of hung with it, and down the line, just built your career in that space. But I think a lot has changed since then. These days, you have a lot of career guidance, a lot of information about what industries are out there. So the whole method of getting to your first job is quite well plotted and planned. However, nobody figured COVID-19 was going to come in and rock that boat. So there's been a lot of change for this past year. And we want to kind of try and understand how that's affected people. As I was talking to one of the panelists earlier today, a lot of what we did in the past was before the internet, before social media, and we kind of learned as we went along. Now there's so much information available, you get a chance to also learn from others and from your educators. And there are also companies that come and give talks and try and woo the brightest into their ranks. So today's panelists are two members from the field of academia. We've got Steve Golden, who's the Director, Division of Industry and Community Engagement at Lasalle College of the Arts. Steve arrived in Japan in 1989 with $200 and a backpack filled with adventure. He has been in Asia ever since. He's worked in senior positions in publishing with Simon & Schuster, Cambridge University Press, and Sage Publications, before becoming a professional travel photographer with Lonely Planet. And Steve joined Lasalle College of the Arts in 2014, and he hopes that his position helps those students of the arts to get better placed in society. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
And our other panelist is Dr. Ben Choi, who is Assistant Professor of Information Technology and Operations Management at the Nanyang Technological University. Ben researches regularly on topics of his interest, including mobile healthcare and analytics, information privacy, and social media, all very current stuff. Ben holds a PhD in information systems from National University of Singapore, and he has published multiple papers in premier information systems journals. Welcome, Ben, and welcome, Steve, to this discussion. I've kind of chosen the both of you because you come from different areas, and one is very technical, one's more the arts and culture and things like that. And we kind of need both in the balance, right? I was looking at some data before the session, and it shows that this is from Statista. In 2019, there were about 17,000 graduates, of which engineering sciences form the bulk, which is around 26%. The humanities and social sciences had about 18%, and information technology had about 7%, right? Then there was another report from the Straits Times which showed that the information and digital tech had 92.7% of the graduates got full-time jobs, and their median gross monthly salary was about $4,400. The engineering cohort, 83.3% got full-time jobs, and their median salary was $3,750. So it was less than the 4.4K. And the humanities and social sciences, only about 70%, 71.2% got full-time jobs, and their salary was lower, it's 3,500. So the question is, how do you kind of find a balance or sort of bridge that gap? Because the narrative has always been to get more creativity into the technology space so that we are able to develop more interesting and engaging programs and projects for society. Um, how how is this setup relevant to that purpose?
I think it's a great question. I think that what we have found in the arts is that when we've done a 10-year longitudinal study of our graduates is that indeed, if you're in the arts or design areas, you will probably start off with a salary that's lower than in tech. That's global. As you progress in your career, the rate of increase is very sharp. So we find people who are 10 years in do very well. I think what's more interesting is that in our same survey, we asked our graduates really up to 10 years out, what's most important for you? What's most important? And we would expect really to see money or status, title. The most important was to be recognized in their field, and the second most was to be able to mentor the next generation. And I think that speaks volumes. So for us, I would say you have to make a living. It's not easy to make a living, but there are passions beyond that that drive many of our graduates.
Ben, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I certainly agree. So the starting salary probably are a lot of the concerns of fresh graduates, but as they progress in their career, very likely they will realize that they probably is not entirely the top priority. There will still be something that they will keep in mind, but there are certainly other priorities in life as one mature and grow. So yeah, I certainly agree with Steve. In terms of drawing the gaps or bridging the differences across various disciplines, what is happening in NTU is that we are launching an array of new courses and programs that actually is a combination of multidisciplinary. So no longer we are talking about pure tech focused graduates or pure social science and arts graduates, but we are going to see a good mixture from multiple domains. So the reason is actually quite market driven. Because we are certainly confronted with a lot of uncertainty going forward. And it has been long recognized that there are weaknesses in the tech graduate as well, even though they may start to be, when they start up in the career, they seems to be much stronger from the salary perspective, but they lack or the weaknesses in soft skill and some other stuff, which is actually very human, certainly is something that they have to work on. So moving forward, I think multidisciplinary is certainly the way to go to equip our students, not just with purely soft skill or hard skill or tech skill, but a combination of both.
Okay, so from what I hear from both of you, it's not the first salary that's important, but maybe getting the first right job. Would that be a fair assumption to make? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, we can tell from a lot of students who are applying for internship program, the amount of stipends or pay that they are getting from the sponsors or the companies are not entirely important. What they really look for, really, for this generation of students, they look for things which they like. They actually look at the working environment. Surprisingly, maybe a lot of them actually look at work-life balance as well. So maybe it is already an old thinking that we should assume that they will love to work very hard in a way, but I think they are going to work much smarter. So they do have a fairly broad spectrum of consideration when they are looking to start up their career.
I agree with that, Ben, and I think that Gen Z in particular, they're very passionate about what they care about. For example, students love sustainability, and that becomes a driving force. They want to do something in their career that has really sustainable outcomes, and they won't settle for anything less. And that's something that's quite interesting in this generation.
So how's the education system gearing itself for this mental change in attitude that's taking place? I mean, back when I was entering the workforce, there was no such thing as work-life balance. Work was an integral part of life. And if you mess around with that, your balance was screwed anyway, right? So now you've got to manage their time. You cannot send them messages at certain times. How does an organization that wants to be profitable and wants things running in a 24/7 environment these days, how do they get the right sort of attitude to come through? I mean, yes, you need to treat your employees well and provide them all the required stuff, but getting pushback of that nature that, oh, okay, it's 5, I'm off, and don't call me till I'm back at 9 or whatever the timing may be. Now, how do education systems then develop a thinking and a mentality to operate in the real world?
I think for us at Lasalle, what we focus on are a lot of group projects. So if we take the area of animation, the students have to work in 2D, they have to work in 3D. There are projects they need to work on with their colleagues. And these projects require a great deal of time, a great deal of interaction, and that models the creative workplace. So when they graduate, they've worked with teams. You're never going to graduate and be a film director right away, for example. And they're very passionate about what they do. What we find is that our students have had to really fight with their parents to enter the arts and design. They've had to, get their way in, and they're so passionate about what they do that for them, hard work is very linked to what they want to do. So for them, entering a job is a dream. They want to practice whatever it is, whether it's acting, I mentioned animation, or graphic design.
Ben, I'm sure your students' parents were less resistant to them joining your area, right? So, how do you then develop that sense of ownership of being employed and being an employee in their mindset?
Right. So, yeah, that is a challenge that has been recognized for some time already as well at NTU. So moving forward, the program has already been approved, and I think it's already launched, so it's going to put in practice starting this semester. Is that we have substantially expanded the practicum program. So previously, students can do their internship with companies either during the summer holiday, which is roughly like 3 months. If not, the other option is that they can take one semester to work on a internship, for example. So the latest setup is that they can actually do internship for 10 months with multiple companies. Now, this is a huge challenge because at the same time, they must actually do their academic work. So it's not just in terms of restructuring the entire syllabus, but the way of the teaching delivery that we are trying to get in line with this new practicum program as well. The entire reason for this change is not just from the students or parents' perspective in terms of getting them trained and experienced with the working environment, more real-life kind of interaction exposure, but it's actually from the employers. They find that they would love to have students staying way longer than just one semester with them, and the reason is very obvious. It's not that they are cheap, but they would really want more time to work with them to develop that relationship and to get them to understand the companies, which is very important, which is the point that we have just raised, to have the passion going on so that they would like to get this talent when they get graduated eventually.
And what sort of percentage of students who have these long internships wind up working with those companies?
Well, currently, because the 10-month internship program we just started, so we do not have much statistics on that, or I should say there's no statistics on that. But in the past, I think it is quite a good percentage of students that are actually getting back to those companies. I don't have the exact number, but my general sense is around a quarter, if not 1/3 typically.
Around quarter. Okay, that's not too bad. And the others, either they don't make the grade, they're not in a position, so they've reckoned they want to do something else, most likely, right?
It's really a testing ground for the students when they get out there. They may think that they'd love to work for a large advertising company, and on their first day they realize that they actually prefer to work in the gray and they want to work for a smaller company. So there's a bit of self-selection in there for sure. And then we have quite a few that are now entering into freelance opportunities. They want to run their own types of businesses. So they do the internship to get a sense, just to learn a little bit about what client relations might be like, what it's like working with a finance team, trying to kind of connect some of the dots where they may not be as strong, and then they go out and start their own companies.
What's the sort of the ratio of students who want to join a large firm or want to join a company versus wanting to be part of the gig economy?
It's changing so fast. What we find is that I would say now it's even getting close to 1/3 who are really interested in being in the gig economy one way or the other, either as independent artists and performers or as freelancers. It's a significant amount, and it's growing every year.
Ben, at your end, do they tend to join companies rather than go and freelance?
Well, indeed, the larger percentage, I think, in fact, the majority of them would like to join big companies. That seems to be the mentality on our side. And I suppose that is the key reason why they have selected the course, because they see very clear career path to begin with. So they really want to realize that dream. There are certainly people, like what Steve just suggested, after an internship, they realize that working in company is not really my cup of tea. So they would like to start their own companies. We do have such cases, and quite a few startups actually, are run by our graduates, in fact.
So, I think one of the biggest challenges for anybody coming out of school and doing their own thing is they don't have a network. Right? They don't have a business network which they can tap to get business. In the past, if you joined a company, you build up your relationship, you build up a network, and then you sort of ventured out on your own. You at least could approach these, your past contacts to see if they wanted to work with you. But what do you suggest for those students who are sort of hell bent on going out and doing their own thing out there? What are your what are your recommendations to them? What would you tell them?
My own recommendation is always for this, and some of the students do start early, by the way, doing professional work, particularly in the area of design communications. They can be designing websites on the side. The musicians are all performing and doing gigs. So a lot of them are doing professional work before they graduate. I always think it's a good idea to join an organization for a couple of years. You can cash up. So whatever you're doing, you have a little bit of, you've got some cash backup. I teach them that it's good to learn how to deal with client management, to learn what are the different divisions within any organization, because even if they're small, they're going to be dealing with clients who may be huge organizations. And if you know your way around, it will only be to your advantage. So I recommend that they actually take 2 years and work in the field.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So I think that, as far as possible, we shouldn't delay. We should really get started, start running as fast as possible. Because once you have started, essentially you are starting to develop your own network, which is going to be extremely valuable in the future to come. Another point that I would like to raise is that, especially for, I know there's a question in chat room about overseas graduate, but I'm very sure you will have some kinds of alumni or graduate groups around. I do not know about other university, but for NTU, unfortunately, our graduates are not really making use of this huge network in the local context. So the business school is actually trying very hard to explore some fairly innovative idea for the next few years to try to attract people who have graduated some time back to come back to connect with our graduates as well as any current student. So there is actually a huge network, I'm very sure, but just that people are not really tapping into that, so that's unfortunate.
I think there's also a question of being overqualified. I think there's some jobs where you need to attain a certain level of credentials, but then when you try and look for a job, you don't have enough practical experience, and in many other places you're way too overqualified for what we need. So what happens to that group of students being overqualified or underqualified. What do you recommend they do?
Well, from our space, overqualification is less of an issue, but underqualification is a severe challenge. So if you take data science and analytics, for example, a lot of local organizations, their minimum requirement is actually a master because they're looking for data scientists and preferably with a PhD. So that's actually a challenge to our bachelor graduates. They find that, oh, I just can't, find myself such a position. So the recommendation to them, and in fact, that's something that we are trying very hard to do, is to receive further training or further, basically the master program that can certainly help them in finding those jobs.
Mm.
I think it's a great question. I think in the arts, there's no such thing as being overqualified. If you're overqualified, then you're sought after as talent. I totally agree with Ben. The issue is if you're underqualified. So we have designers who want to learn coding so they can kind of bridge that gap that we were talking about earlier in the session and work in tech companies. And in that case, yeah, if you're going up against an engineer, you'll be surely underqualified. But then you have to really focus on what your strength is, which is the design element, and understand that UX UI is the way of the future and that you always need designers in the process. So it's a great question.
Yeah, so in your communication with potential employers of your graduates, what is the feedback that you're getting from them? What are they telling you about the kind of graduates that have come out and are being offered to them and their companies? What sort of feedback do you get?
The young graduates, again, we go back to Gen Z, they've got skills that other groups don't have. They're obviously digital natives, and they don't even see this as a skill. Toggling between different apps, Instagram and TikTok, they don't see it as a skill. They see it as just as their life online. And then they enter organizations and realize, hey, this is an asset. I'm not going to be the one who's designing our social media program. They will be, especially if we want younger customers, right? We understand that the graduates coming out now are very good at ideation, and they're very good at multitasking. Of course, the opposite side is that everybody's impatient. In my day, you had mentors and you would, I'm a photographer. I would work, I worked with a Japanese photographer for, several months, sort of carrying tripods up the hill, and I learned the skill. And I think today's generation wouldn't tolerate that. They'd want to just start shooting right away.
And certainly no tripods. They've got their mobile phones to do the work.
Exactly.
Well, we have a pretty much similar observation as what Steve has just mentioned. So for our students, the typical feedback is that they have that can-do mentality. They are very good at doing things, but typically the younger ones, they prefer to be left alone. So just leave them at home, give them things to do. They don't want to talk to you really. So drop them a message, it's perfectly fine. If you want to talk to them, use Zoom, but physical face-to-face, nah. so yeah, that's a new generation. So that's why we are quite worried about that soft human skills that seems to be getting washed away totally. So you can't even really tell, am I working with a machine or working with a human? But you can never see their faces.
Yes, I've noticed that a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of blank boxes that you're talking to, right? But is that the way of the future? I mean, is that how it's going to be? Has this whole work from home environment that has been developed because of COVID-19, is that the way it's going to be? I mean, then do we really need human interaction?
It's such a great question. And my feeling is that it was heading that way anyway. It was heading toward work from home. And we see this, especially in Ben's area. A lot of tech companies were allowing people to work kind of wherever they wanted in the US. And I'm sure on the practical side, companies are happy to get rid of giant rents. And we found that there is a very easy way through this technology, which existed before. Now we just have the willpower to do it, to have these meetings. that it will continue. That's for sure. I'm not sure we can go back to working from 9 to 5. I'm not sure I can go sit in the office from 9 to 5. On the other side of it, the interaction, it's a great question. Zoom interaction is not the same as sitting in a room with someone and having a chat. And when it comes to brainstorming and innovation, it makes you wonder, what will happen? It's a concern.
Why do you say for brainstorming Zoom may not work? Why do you feel that? I mean, it's still people talking.
It is, but it's orchestrated. I'm setting a time and I'm inviting you in. The day of just happening, maybe if I'm live, I happen to see a colleague having a coffee. I sit down, we have a chat, and then suddenly we realize we have a great idea. That happens so often in person. And I do worry about that spontaneity not being there anymore.
But you could get that out. I mean, that's somewhat similar. I mean, even in an organization pre-COVID, it was, you would have the water cooler discussions that could result in an idea, but you also have formal brainstorming sessions, right? So in that context, the Zoom meeting would be the formal brainstorming session, and your WhatsApp message to somebody, hey, I got this idea, da, 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 da. It goes to and fro, and isn't it just a very different platform, but the same outcomes?
Arguably, maybe it's generational. Maybe folks in my generation just like to sit in person, and that's very possible. Time will tell, for sure.
Ben, what are your thoughts on the virtual and the real world meetings?
Well, that is something that we study very extensively in research, actually. So it really depends on which camp you subscribe to. One camp is about how natural, that kind of interaction is. So the argument is that this is what we call mediated communication, by the way. So the mediation actually takes away a lot of these natural attributes of human interactions. So it can't really feel you, which is very hard to define, to be frank. I don't really have that sense of co-presence to a huge extent because it's just Zoom is just a 2D environment, right? So when all those important attributes are being removed or washed away in the mediated environment, as a result, when we are engaging some fairly intensive cognitive kind of task, it becomes quite difficult for the collaboration to take place. So brainstorming is certainly one of those whereby you need that very rapid bouncing of ideas and interactions, which is entirely impromptu. So the environment might not be suitable. Now, the other camp, which actually is against this kind of belief, is that, well, human beings actually evolve over time. So we will find our way to survive. So it's about survivability. So yeah, we have been doing that for generations, if not centuries. That's how the entire human evolvement comes about. So probably, indeed, there's a generational thing. We are seeing some subtle evolvement among people, that the younger generation is so evolved that they are just they naturally adapt to that kind of mediated interaction. For them, that is fine. I don't need that feeling kind of, chemistry. But for me, seeing someone 2D through a headphone and a mic, that's perfectly fine with them. Moving forward, there are companies indeed that try to engage more technologies to try to facilitate virtual brainstorming and collaboration. So that's where people start to bring in the virtual reality or augmented reality stuff in. I have witnessed myself some of those in conferences, academic conferences as well, because we just can't travel last year. Unfortunately, the coffee place, the virtual coffee place, I'm the only person there. So I think it's a generation kind of thing. Compared to 2 years ago, yeah, you can see a lot of people hanging around the bar. This year, I'm actually posting message, where's everybody?
They've probably gone off to get a drink, a stiff one. Great. So I've got some questions that were sent through earlier from students who are just about to graduate or who may have just started taking the first steps out into the working world. So let me just run through some of them and see how you'd like to respond to them. This is from Rachel Koo, who's asking, what shift in jobs can the graduating batch be expecting? What are the future trends?
Well, one interesting thing we have to observe, which has happened over the last year, is that we're consuming creative content like never before in history. If we think about the amount of hours we watch Netflix, the amount of books we've read, the amount of time we've spent maybe playing a musical instrument or listening to music, it's surely more than maybe the last few years combined. It's unparalleled, and this demand for content is shaping the future jobs. We see in the art and design space specifically, there's obviously interior design is an area that's much sought after right now because everybody's working at home and they need to change their workspace. We see animation and filmmaking emerging because of the streaming technologies and this voracious appetite for content. And then we see graphic design and anything to do with user interface just mushrooming because of what seems to be the death of brick and mortar industries and online purchasing. So everybody's rushing to e-commerce. And these are all areas that we see developing and growing at a tremendous pace right now, within the last year even.
Well, yeah, I can pick up from what Steve has left off. So it's indeed the digitization acceleration that we are witnessing. It has been a trend for more than, I think, close to 2 decades already. And in the business space, because of COVID, we can see a unforeseeable acceleration in the past year because normal operation just can't go forward and basically everything is, stop. So there's no choice, but companies has to digitize. As a result, we can see that there's a lot of more traditional kind of practices are getting quite endangered if you still stick around the same set of skills. One experience that I can share with you folks is, for example, the accounting examination, certification examination. The existing practice because of ACCA's standard is that it still has to be a physical examination. Imagine that was happening during circuit breaker. So it's just crazy, right? So, I mean, you have to restructure that. There's no way that we can have physical examination anymore. So, of course, digitization these days comes together with automation as well. So a lot of manual works are actually getting taken over by machines. So that is some of the key area of challenges. So moving forward, certainly we have to keep a more open mind to actually adapt or change some of the fundamentals like accounting practices. Yeah, it's still important to understand the policy and standard, but at the same time, we have to inject a little bit more towards the tech side and to be a little bit more flexible to venture out of that traditional bubble.
The question on the importance of the first job in setting the tone trajectory of somebody's career. Is that something you believe in, or do you believe in the philosophy that you get into something and then your career will find you as you move along from one to another?
Such a great question. And I find that with our students, because they're studying specific programs, whether it's acting or whether it's music, composition, that they come in and they're in a bit of a silo. And they need to step back, I think, moving forward and really think about what their skills are, because there's a rise of creative jobs in non-traditional creative industries. As an example, we find places like DBS Bank have innovation centers filled with designers that are looking at how to make the banking experience better for the customers. Tan Tock Seng Hospital employs designers for the same reason. We're finding these jobs that would never have existed even 5 years ago, really popping up now because of, again, going back to experience for the customers. So this is something that's super relevant. I think that your first job will help inform what your interests are, what your skills are. It will help you decide whether that's the direction you want to take or whether you want to shift a bit. I think any job, even if you're working at Starbucks, will inform you as to whether you'd want to have a career when you're, for example, public facing or not. So everything helps you decode and get closer to what you want to be.
That's right. So I think it's really a argument between should you have a depth in terms of certain area versus like a wave over multiple areas. I guess there's no straightforward answer really. Probably you can only see successful cases whereby someone stick around the same industry for like decades and tell you that this is perfectly fine, this is the right strategy. Some other people will tell you that I've been working in like 5 different industries for the past 2 decades and I have this vast set of experience. So in terms of the first job, I certainly agree. Keep a more exploratory kind of mindset. Select something that you're comfortable with and give it some time. I think that is one of the critical issues. Even though you might not like it at the beginning, but give it some time. Try to learn from it and really understand that particular job scope, that particular industry or organization, and learn from it. And maybe after 2 or 3 years, then sit down and think about, okay, do I want to switch to another organization in the same sector, or I want to switch to totally another different sector, for example. I guess graduates are still very young. They will still have that space and time to do this exploration.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a question here about somebody who's not clear about what they want to do. So should they just get something, grab the first job that comes along, whether it is of little interest to them or not?
It sounds like that person needs to do a little soul searching. And maybe a good way to start is to write down in a very basic sense what you like and what you don't like. Do you like working alone, or do you like working with people? Everything. And then from there, start working out what's interesting to you and what's not interesting to you. You may find that the insurance area is absolutely not interesting, but you have a great interest in media. And just brainstorm. And the last thing I would suggest is to really, it's always good to talk to people and ask them, what do you think I'm good at? What am I good at? And you'll be surprised. Parents, friends, people in your social group, they'll tell you. And this is part of the journey of self-discovery. And from there, then start reading a lot of job descriptions and thinking about what sounds interesting and narrowing down your search a bit.
Yeah, in fact, that is very similar to my recommendation to my students. So I encountered some of these questions before. So what I have told them to do is, okay, write down 10 reasons why you think you will like this, and write down another 10 reasons why you think that this is absolutely something and pain in the ass. If you can't finish this list, both lists, in fact, you don't understand this well enough. Okay, so go find out, do whatever within your capability. Talk to people, read something, go online chat room, go ask Kura, pose a question, go find out. Then until when you finish these 2 lists, sit down and look at that. Does that make sense to you? Start to reflect on, okay, what do you see yourself 10 years later, 20 years later? All right, does these yes and no basically help you to get to that stage? If not, what then? So this is my recommendation to them.
There's a question on future-proofing yourself as a fresh graduate, right? Can you future-proof your future? I mean, things change so quickly, right? What is the sort of the best mindset to adopt when it comes to entering into the job market?
Okay, I will take that because that is a daily issue confronted by the tech sector, isn't it?
Yes.
10 years ago, we are looking at Java. Now we are looking at Python and R. It won't be around for 10 years. Come on. So there is the only skills or ability that allows you to achieve some stage of protection against the future changes and uncertainty, I guess, is we simply have to continue to learn. If we have the mindset that, whatever that I receive from the university, from the lecturers, professors, and instructors are sufficient for me until my retirement, probably that mindset is not going to work out very well, especially in the tech sector. So typically fresh graduates, they are armed with the skills based on the syllabus. Their skill sets should be good for the next 5 years or so. Beyond the 5 years, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what is the next language, for example. I don't know what is after analytics and visualization. None of us can tell. So the best that we can do is that we have to, you have to observe the fundamental skills, which is the ability to learn, to ability to self-educate. Just like just now we discussed about go find out. Yeah, that is a good process of knowledge discovery. If you have problem talking to people, probably that's something that you would like to work on. If you can't really talk to people very well, then what else? What are the substitutes, can you use? So these are the fundamental skills that I think in a way can lead to that stage of like future protection against some uncertainty and changes.
I think that my advice would be to, number one, whatever you're doing, for your first job, just work hard. Work hard and learn and talk to people in your organization. Doesn't matter if they're in your team, talk to everyone. Look at the big picture and continue learning. Always continue learning. It's essential. There's no future proofing. What kind of future proofing is there for when you don't know what's next? But if you've got the right attitude, you'll always be employable.
Are the education programs, are they up to speed for what's needed today, or are they still lagging somewhat in terms of delivering methods to operate in today and tomorrow's world?
Well, I think on our side, there's certainly a lag, despite our best effort and interest in closing down the gap. The entire reason is because it takes time for us to generate the instructions materials and the teaching materials. And you can imagine that things are changing probably on a yearly basis. So techniques that you're using this year, probably there's a new technique at the end of this year. So it's just impossible to keep changing at that pace in terms of our teaching syllabus. So yeah, indeed, we actually are very open to our students with regards that, yeah, what we are teaching here is not really the absolute latest, but we try our very best to stay most current, and most important, really, is get your fundamental right, because things won't exist in vacuum. Look, the new technique actually is being extended from the old technique. So that's where that capability of self-learning, knowledge discovery, and self-teaching will come in to be most important.
I think that in the art and design sectors, what you'll find is that, and we'll look at fashion in particular, what the future is and what the changes are and the innovations are actually coming from the younger generations. So the students, in a sense, are always going to be more up to speed and trendier and up on the latest of what's happening in every area, from music to even, again, to fashion and to design. Because they're the next generation already. They're taking the foundation of what they've learned, which is what we teach, and they're going the next step. So the best we can do is to give them a strong foundation and lots of chances to look beyond their specific area of expertise. So if you're looking at cross-curricular types of projects, bringing in different types of people together from different backgrounds that can work on things, that's where you'll find the innovation. So I think education is preparing them for that. We may not be teaching the latest of things, but we're preparing them to create the next latest thing.
There's a question here on how to try and get into the job market if you have little to no internship experience.
I love this question because I get it every single day. And what I tell the students is, okay, first of all, don't mask your CV. Don't put, all of your work experience, if it's a cumulative of, 3 months of experience in 4 different jobs at the top of your CV. You are a fresh graduate, and organizations need fresh graduates, particularly because when you've worked for a company for 4 or 5 years, you're bringing with you a lot of baggage. You're bringing with you a culture from a different company. The only ones who don't have any of this kind of tabula rasa are fresh graduates. They're excited, they've got the right attitude, they haven't been brainwashed, And they're really, in addition to the workplace, for molding a company's future. So what you need to do is really be clear about what your dreams are and what your career aspirations are. And don't try to cover for the fact that you don't have a lot of work experience.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Basically, yeah, as a fresh grad, everyone knows what a fresh grad has. If you have no work experience, you have no work experience. And being a fresh grad, on its own is actually a huge plus. Like what Steve suggested. And I think everyone understands fresh grads has that drive and passion, which over time, when people are in the organization for 2 decades, you typically, so you want that fresh blood, being injected to re-energize organizations. Yeah, so yeah, that is your main selling point.
What would be a couple of things that somebody who is about to graduate should bear in mind or exercise before looking for their first job? Steve?
I think you have to be true to yourself and really think about what it is that you're interested in. Focus less on money for your first job. Focus more on, is this a great opportunity to work with somebody who inspires me? Is it a great opportunity to learn something I've always wanted to learn? And think about it that way.
Okay.
Right.
Ben?
Yeah, I agree. So what I would say is that keep an open mind. We understand the market is challenging for now and probably the next 1 or 2 years as well. So absolutely, money is not really, it's important, but it's not the most vital consideration, especially for fresh grad. It's most important to get yourself started with something that you can stick around with for some time. So to think about that very wisely, whether you will be comfortable sticking around the positions of that company for like 2 to 3 years. And I guess that is something that should be kept in mind.
Great. Steve and Ben, thank you for weighing in with your thoughts and your experiences, I guess, with having spoken with students over the years. I think what I got from this was, and it's probably from the perspective of a fresh graduate, is to realize that you're going into a company as the future of that company, right? Rather than going in there as a nobody. So think of yourself as a clean slate, but one that's willing to absorb, adopt and adapt, and learn and help build a company's future or your industry's future, maybe. Or if you take that mentality, take it to another industry and flourish in that space. Thanks again to both of you for your comments, and thanks to the questions that have been sent to me and been shared on this during this chat. And thanks again also to our partner OUE for enabling this series of discussions. Look forward to the next one. Thank you so much.